Let's do this. Hey everybody, and happy Friday. You have a big Friday today because you made it. You finally got done with Chapter 8. We got done with Chapter 8, which of course was quadratic functions. And we studied a lot about manipulating equations this chapter. We studied a lot about parabolas, of course, and projectiles, throwing balls through the air, water balloons. And now we have a whole bunch of different ways to analyze parabolas moving forward. Chapter 9 will be quadratic equations, so a lot of the solving stuff and equation manipulation stuff you've been doing recently, we're just going to pick right back up starting on Monday with Chapter 9. And so it'll kind of continue. You get to apply a lot of your new skills. But for today, what you're going to do, you have a classwork assignment. You also have some homework. I'm going to explain both of them. So we're done with Chapter 8 now. On your last few homeworks, you had several questions from the Chapter 8 review section of the textbook. So you've pretty much done all of the Chapter 8 review questions. Hopefully on last night's homework, you went through the table and checked your answers, not just the chapter review problems on last night's homework, but the homework from the nights before that. There were also chapter review problems on those, okay? So you are done with the chapter review problems even in Chapter 8. You've done a lot of Chapter 8 at this point. So what we're going to do for your classwork today, or in place of your classwork, right, because we're not really in class anymore, your classwork assignment is to work on your Chapter 8 toolkit. So this was something that I did give out a few days before we got sent home. And I also have emailed it out, and it is on Google Classroom, so hopefully you can get it. Again, during this whole shelter-in-place remote learning time period, you don't have to print out any of your documents. You can just do this toolkit on your own sheet of paper, and that's totally fine. So I will be collecting this in addition to the other work that you're doing right now. When we do get back to school, you'll just hand me a big old packet, so you do have to do this assignment. Okay, so I do have a rubric for it like usual. I'm going to go through this in a second. The first thing that it says here on the toolkit is, well, you have to do the whole thing. I'm going to end up grading just 4 of these. Okay, I'm not going to tell you which ones. 4 terms I'm going to look at, because I don't care if you're just getting it all done, right? That's not what I'm looking for when I'm grading something. I care about, did you go and show me that you understand this pretty deeply? Or did you show yourself that you understand this pretty deeply? Are you giving yourself a shot? Or is it clear that maybe you need to do a little bit more research, or ask more questions, or try to figure this out so that you understand this a little bit more deeply? You feel a little bit better about it. Okay, so do put some effort into all these. I'm not going to tell you which 4 I'm going to grade, but for each 4 of these, here are the 4 things that I'm going to check for each term that I do end up grading. Number 1, does your description of the term, you have to describe, right, fully describe, does your description show complete mastery? A variety of examples or explanations are included. Okay, so I read that directly from the rubric. A description shows complete mastery, a variety of examples or explanations are included. Okay, so for all of these, I don't want you just to quickly answer it. I want you to say everything that you can say about it. So this is kind of one of the great things about toolkits, I think, is that it gets to show everything that you know, and if you feel like you don't know as much as you should be doing research, and you should be Googling things online, or you going to the online textbook, of course, reading the definitions, and you could even copy down the definitions from the back of the book on the online textbook, and I'll provide that link. Okay, so that's very important to me. One of the reasons why I do assign this to you is because I think it's a good practice to get into, that whenever I had a big test coming up in college, what I would do is I would look at the textbook, and I wouldn't just go through it once. I wouldn't just go through it twice. I would actually go through the textbook maybe 3 or 4 times. The reason why you go through things more than once is because, and I think you'll admit it in math, a lot of stuff, the first time you see it, it can feel very hard. So if it feels very hard the first time, you need to go through it twice. You need to go through it twice, it'll get a little bit easier, 3 times, 4 times, because by the time you've gone through things 3 or 4 times, those things that are hard the very, very first time oftentimes feel easy on the 3rd or 4th times. Will there still be hard things 3 or 4 times through? Yes, but those are the few. You only want to have a few hard things remaining. And those things that were hard the first time, you want to make them not hard by the third or fourth time going through. So that's one thing that I do see, that a lot of times it gets hard and you kind of avoid those problems. Try to prevent that. Try to actually really go deeply and go through things 3 or 4 times. If you're still struggling with it, then you need to reach out for help. Okay, so put down a whole bunch of information for these questions here. So for instance, roots, don't just say x-intercepts. Show where they are on the graph. Give examples of irrational roots. Give examples of imaginary roots. So show, right, when we solve for a negative square root, for instance, then the roots are, those are kind of example walking through. Okay, second requirement of this, at least one example is included and clearly shown. So we have a whole example section over here. Of course, if you're doing something like monomial, binomial, and trinomial, you're giving 3 examples, 1 for each. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So you do need to fill out an example for each one and make it a good example, make it be something useful. Thirdly, color used to highlight important information. So this is a requirement for each and every single one of these terms. What you want to do is you want to add color to every single term. So I don't want to just see a few terms having a little bit of color. What you're going to do is circle some key information in a different color, or use a highlighter or something like that. Get something that's going to pull out that really key information, pull it off the page. Because when you're looking at this later, you're keeping this toolkit for future classes. This toolkit could be helpful for geometry even, algebra 2 and beyond. So when you do look at this later, you don't want to just have a bunch of scratched out pencil. You want to have some bolded, in a different color information that when you see it, it jumps right out. That's the thing I need to remember about common factors, for instance. So this is kind of similar how when I send you out an email to you guys that's very long, right? I am in the habit of that, writing things that have a lot of information because I want to give you access to all the information that I have. But one thing that I try to do is I try to bold certain things. Like, what's the point? What's the thing that I really want you to see to then figure out, do you need to look at that email in a little bit more detail? Right? Because not everything I tell you, or not everything, all those words in email that I send you, is terribly important all the time. But the things bolded out draw your attention to this is the topic, and I need to read more about this, or I don't. Okay, so really bold that key information. That's something that I'll definitely check, and that's something that I happen to notice in Chapter 7, the Chapter 7 toolkits, which I'm currently grading. A lot of people didn't do that, so that's a very easy one to make sure you get full credit, rather than not full credit for that term. Final requirement for each of these, if you did look up a definition, it is an appropriate definition given the way that we use the term in class in Chapter 8, right? Chapter 8 is quadratic functions, so you're looking up and you're explaining these things within the context of quadratic functions. Example of this is this one right here, factoring, for instance. So this chapter 8, quadratic functions, you were factoring quadratic functions. One thing that I could see some people make a mistake on is if they're just factoring, you're just trying to get it done, definition, explanation, example, is, hey, maybe you're just going to show me the factoring of a number, not of a quadratic. Here's an example, number 16. So for instance, if you have the number 16, you can actually factor that, right? There's a factoring process of the number 16. But that process is something you should have studied in middle school. So if that's your example, the factoring of the number 16, that's not good enough for an A+ answer of a Chapter 8 quadratic functions toolkit, right? 16 can be factored because 16 can be broken up into smaller numbers, written in terms of its factors. 16 is a composite number. It's composed of other factors. So for instance, 8 times 2 is one way we can compose 16, 8 times 2. And then you can factor it further. 4 times 2 times 2 brings us to 16. And then you can factor it further and find the prime factorization, which is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So you've done factoring before in the past, but don't do an explanation like that for this toolkit, because that's the way you maybe used to refer to factoring. We have factoring now, we have quadratic factoring. So perhaps you explain what factoring is for a quadratic. We're trying to pull out common factors. Here's what it looks like for this equation, right? Y equals x squared plus 2x plus 1, for instance. Okay, so those are the 4 requirements as you work through this. All right, so this is very important. A lot of the reasons why I give you this assignment is because I think it actually reduces your stress a bit too. Not only you're going to have this resource to hold on to the rest of the year and hold on to it for Algebra 2 in case a topic comes up and you want to relook back at how we did this in Algebra 1. But in general, I find like going through something like this and getting done with it, it reduces stress because it's like, I've done this whole chapter, it's kind of hard to remember exactly everything that was in the chapter, so once you're done with this, you're like, okay, cool, now I've seen everything, I've had to talk about everything again, so there's nothing really, there's no huge subject that I completely forgot or I'm completely missing and I don't get caught off guard anytime in the near future. Okay, so that is your assignment, that is my explanation. Good luck. Your assignment is the Quadratic Functions Toolkit, Chapter 8 today. Okay, and then for homework, we do have Khan Academy. So do that homework this weekend. Those are some of the remaining tasks that I haven't assigned you yet for quadratic functions, completing the square and all that good stuff. So you'll be in great shape if you do all of that. And yes, I'm so excited that we're back here and you guys are doing good work. I think you're going to be in fantastic shape. That's great. Good luck. Please email me if you have any questions, and maybe I'll see you guys later today on the Zoom. Bye.